Hello, Jane. Welcome to the Six Comms podcast.
Good morning, Lisa. Thank you for inviting me. Very happy to be here.
Yes, very excited about this. It's something I talk about all the time. The aspect of communication that I feel is often neglected and is absolutely crucial. It's the element of listening. And we're going to be focusing very much on solution focused listening in this episode, which I know you are an expert in. So I'm very excited to gain your valuable tips and wisdom around this topic. So let's just dive in, first of all, by defining what solution focused listening is.
A great question. Well, I guess the idea sort of really started from the therapy world. So back in the 1970s, the founders of the solution focused approach called Steve DeShazer and Insoo Kim Berg took a very different approach to therapy. And instead of listening to clients' problems to understand why does this client have a problem or what's triggered the problem, what should we do differently, they really paid attention to what was working already in the client's life. What did the client want more of? What were their goals for therapy? And really listen to them in their strengths and resources. So looking at what's working rather than what's not working. And since then, it's exploded into the coaching field, in organizations, in the classroom, and with teachers. But the good news is you don't have to be a trained therapist or coach to use these ideas just in your day-to-day conversations. So I think for me, solution focused listening is really about the mindset, or how am I listening? What am I listening for? When I'm hearing somebody talk, what am I listening to? Because I know, obviously, I've heard you say that before about how important listening is, and lots of people will be familiar with the term active listening. So as we're hearing somebody tell a story, say you're listening to your colleague talking about a really frustrating meeting, or your partner talking about something annoying that happened at work, we might say something like, wow, that sounds like you've had a really tough day, to show that we're really empathizing and listening to the story. And I guess what we do in solution focused way of listening, we might still make really helpful empathic statements like that to show that we're taking the person seriously. But what I might be listening to in that story is maybe, as well as telling me about the frustrations of the meeting, they're also saying, oh, it was so annoying. I just had to go for a walk at lunchtime to calm down, or I just had to get a change of scenery. And I will be interested in, wow, giving them a compliment maybe of like, wow, it sounds like you really figured out what you needed to do to manage the rest of the day. Or it sounds like you did a great job looking after yourself so you could go back to your next meeting. Or if they haven't told me something that's already good, I might be really curious about, goodness, that sounds so frustrating. How did you get through the rest of your day? So what I'm really interested in is not the story about the frustration and the meeting and the sort of the bad stuff. It's more like, how did that person survive that meeting? What strengths did they display? What sort of coping strategies they have, or strengths? So I'm really looking at every conversation in a really different way about, how can I see this person at their best? How can I see their strengths and resources, pay attention to what's working? So we can all apply that to anybody that we're listening to. It's about often listening. What compliment could I give this person? What does their story tell me about what's important to them, or what they value, or what is it they want more of in their life? So it's just a sort of, you're listening to very different parts of the conversation.
And I think that's a really lovely approach. I mean, it's a complete mindset shift. I'm thinking you would have to, am I right in saying you would have to do quite a lot of preparation work yourself? Because I talk a lot about, if you're really listening to someone, it takes an enormous amount of energy. So I don't know whether you could speak to that in terms of, because I'm just thinking of people I work with and the constant meeting upon meeting, the very tight schedule. It's like you can hardly get a moment to breathe in between. So how do you prepare? Because that's quite a mental shift.
It's really different. And I certainly struggled. So I trained as a clinical psychologist about 20 years ago, and then came across the solution focused approach maybe about 5 years after that. And I showed up on the training course going, what do you mean you don't have to listen to the client's problems and talk about their whole history? And we're listening for this. And I was really skeptical about this way of working when I first came across it. And then we did lots of exercise and lots of kind of practice. And gradually you get to see it takes a bit of work to listen to something different, but it's such an energizing approach. So ironically, while it might take a little bit of work to focus yourself on what to listen to, because you're then listening to what is working, what the client's done. I find I'm constantly inspired and energized by the conversations I have, because instead of going, oh my God, not another story about this or whatever, I'm just like, oh my goodness, this person is amazing because they've survived this. So yes, it takes a little bit of work initially, but I think it's one of those things that it pays off for both people in the conversation, in terms of that person will see themselves differently. They will go, yeah, I did get through that meeting and I did get through that day. And oh, yes, no, this is something I can do something about. And I'm like, wow, what an amazing friend, partner, colleague that they did this. So it actually brings a lot of energy once you start listening in this way.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I think you mentioned a few kind of key questions there around what strengths am I hearing? How can I see them at their best? I love this one. What compliment can I give them? I like that as an approach. And then what are they doing well, and really elevating that and empowering them? As you say, it's very energizing. There is a Chinese character that you've made reference to when we've spoken about this before. I was going to try and pronounce it, but I don't want to embarrass myself to the listeners that are Chinese speaking. But it's a character that I know that anyone listening that is Chinese will know for sure. And it integrates eyes, ears, heart, and full attention. You did touch upon active listening as a term that we're perhaps more familiar with. But how have you applied this to your own listening with colleagues or with loved ones?
A great question. I can't remember when I first came across this. I'm not sure I can pronounce it any better than you. My kids both speak Mandarin, and sadly I don't. But the character is Ting, which is to listen. So I would recommend, obviously we're on a podcast, so I can't show it to anybody, but I would recommend to anybody listening to pause and Google this. And so you've got a picture in front of you, and there's lots of, if you do an image search, there's lots of images that will show you. And I love this because I think we associate listening with words. What are the words somebody's saying, and how can we sort of repeat that back to somebody? But this character really brings in paying attention with your eyes. What is this person demonstrating? Maybe through facial expressions or body language. Or another part of it is king. So the idea is we're listening to each person as if they're a king and giving them our full respect and attention, and brought together with the idea of one heart, really listening to what's important to somebody. And I think in my work, I don't find that difficult. Well, now that I've done the training and got over my skepticism, when I'm in my workspace, I might be in a quiet office with no distractions, the door's shut, or if I'm on a Zoom call, my emails, I turn my email off so I don't get pinged and distracted. So I create that environment to fully listen to somebody, and then obviously pay attention to what they're saying and how they're saying it. So in a workspace, I find that quite easy. I would love to say I'm a great solution-focused wife and parent, but I'm also human. So it doesn't always work. And I think one of the biggest lessons I got in listening is, this was before I moved to Singapore and had the luxury of having a live-in helper. I was a busy working mom looking after the kids and in the middle of cooking dinner. And my son was talking to me, and I could literally tell you every single word he said. While I was making dinner, I thought I was doing a really good job of paying attention. And he sat there and went, "Mummy, you're not listening." And he came and put his hands on my cheeks and turned my face to him. And I was just sitting there going, oh my God, I'm somebody who I get paid to listen. I've been trained for years to listen to people. And yeah, I'm not doing a good job with my family always. So that was a real sort of take home for me about the importance of making yourself present. And actually, it wouldn't have taken more than a few minutes to really pay attention to what he's saying and then go back to dinner. It didn't matter if we ate dinner 5 minutes earlier or later or whatever, but that mattered to him. That it's about conveying how important he is to me, that I'm making time for him. I'm really interested in what he's saying. So that's something I don't always get it right by any means. I think my kids would laugh if they were listening. But it's trying to do that. So it's really trying to make sure if I'm listening to you, my body is turned to you, my face is turned to you. Even things like how you stand, because I was a guinea pig on a therapy training workshop that I was the client. And so my therapist got me to imagine what a miracle day would look like. And one of my things was walking into my children's bedroom. And instead of being half in, half out, get up, it's time for school, I would actually fully walk into the room and actually face the bed and have my feet pointing towards the bed. And that sounds like really silly, but at the same time, that's conveying to my children, you're important. I have time for you. So I think it's showing up in your entirety. And obviously, you don't do that every minute of every day, but it's about making sure maybe we have a family dinner and obviously, we don't allow phones at the dinner table, but we don't allow books either. It's about time to really sit and be together. So we create listening spaces and times that we can all talk together. But also, when your kids catch you, think, okay, can I just put down what I'm doing, especially in the age of phones when we're all multitasking, just put your phone down. But think about your whole body. It's like whole body listening. So really paying attention to the person that you're with.
Yeah. I'm copiously writing down notes, so I am very much actively listening right now. But I just wrote down a few key things that you talked about that I think can relate, yes, to your personal life, but also professional life as well, which is you mentioned about creating that right environment. So taking the time and the intention to do that. You talked about your body and your face and having that facing the person that you're communicating with. I love this phrase that you use about making yourself present. I think even just that phrase, reminding yourself in between meetings, that's quite important. I did pick up on something that I know because I have been to your solution focus conference, but for listeners that aren't familiar with solution focus, you did talk about what a miracle day would look like. And I just wondered if you could, because I love this concept of miracle day, but I just wondered if you could just speak to that a bit more so that listeners understand what it is.
Yeah, of course. So, yeah, I think it's one of the sort of key techniques in the solution focused approach. Often, if anybody's heard about the solution focused approach, the miracle day or the miracle pick question is something they've often heard of. And the idea behind that is I'm really, or even before I ask the miracle question, I need to get a clear picture of where does this person want to go? Why have they come to see me? What is it they want to be different in their life? So not what's brought them to see me. Maybe it's not that I'm interested in, okay, your story about anxiety and how this is getting in the way of your life. I'm interested in, or suppose the anxiety was no longer a problem or you'd managed to overcome this. What would be different in your day-to-day life? And they might talk about, I'd be feeling confident. I'm feeling some calm. I'd be feeling in control. So it's words about almost who they want to be in their life. What is it they want to be different? Who do they want to be? And then once we've got that clear picture of what they want, then we do this wonderful question. Well, suppose you go after, so they come to see me in the middle of the day. Suppose after our meeting, you go back to work, you go home, you do whatever you're going to do for the rest of the day, and you go to bed and you go to sleep. And while you're asleep, a miracle happens. And the miracle is that when you wake up tomorrow morning, you wake up as this calm, confident, in control version of yourself. But obviously, as that's happened while you're asleep, you don't know that's happened. So, what would be the very first thing that you notice tomorrow morning that tells you this miracle's happened? And then what you do is you go through the whole day of what would it be like when you're having breakfast, or how would your husband notice, or your children notice, or how would your teacher notice, or your boss notice? And we talk about all the really minute differences in their day-to-day life when they're showing up as this calm, confident version of themselves. And it's really interesting because I think that's the heart of the solution focused approach, is about getting details of how they want their life to be different. And because often people come to therapy going, well, I need some amazing anxiety management technique, or if only I do this right thing, then I'll be fine. But life is lived in those ordinary, everyday moments. And it's, well, if I start the day by smiling at my husband, giving my kids a hug, having a nice breakfast, my whole day is going to be radically different than if I wake up and go, yeah, whatever, right, let's get up, let's go to school, bus is coming. While we can't control other people, we can influence other people. And it's just there's all those little interactions. Or suppose you show up in your next Zoom meeting as a confident version of yourself. What are your colleagues going to notice? Or when you get home from a good day at work, what would be the first thing your children notice, even without you telling them there's anything different? So it's really about just creating that picture of real life. It's not a miracle like I've won the lottery or suddenly become a millionaire overnight. It's just your real life, only you're the best version of yourself in it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. You have mentioned quite a few times about us only being human, and humans are flawed and we can't be our best selves all of the time because life would be boring if that were the case, wouldn't it, Jane? But there are moments when we do complain and we are a bit more negative than usual. And as much as I'd like to say that I'm positive all the time with a smile on my face, we do have those moments when we feel a bit more down than others and we start complaining, and it can get quite negative. We can feel like we just want to vent to our friends or our colleagues. And that's perfectly fine as well, because as we've said, we're all human. But that can take a lot of energy, not just for the person that's complaining, but for the person that's on the receiving end of that as the listener. I hear this in my work. I hear complaining a lot. I think we all do. But how can we stay engaged with that and make it as positive an experience as it can be?
That's a great question. I touched a little bit on that earlier, but I just want to share this wonderful exercise we do when we're training as solution focused therapists or coaches, which we call listening with the third ear. So we have this exercise where the speaker has to complain for 3 minutes without stopping about something pet peeve, something that really annoys them. And our job as the listener is to really think, okay, I've got to be able to give them 3 compliments at the end of that. So it might be noticing the strengths that they've used to cope with that situation. It might be, what does this tell me about what values this person has? That maybe they're talking about something being really unfair, and you say something like, wow, sounds like you're really the type of person that, justice and fairness is really important to you. So I think it's kind of shifting what you listen to. So it's perfectly giving that person time and space. We're not avoidant of problems. We're not taking people seriously and go, oh, let's just look at the best of this. It's all great. It's not that. It's not being Pollyanna-ish or toxic positivity, because that's really unhelpful. But we give space and listening with this, like, as in Ting, to listen and do our whole body listening and give that person space so they feel we're taking them seriously. But then it's about how could it maybe give them a compliment? Maybe I'll ask a question about how they've managed this. Or what is it they want to be different? So again, I'm going to use my children as an example. And so my son came home recently and was complaining, I'm fed up of doing homework. I don't want to do homework. And why do you make me eat this food? And this is like an after school snack. And he's come home tired and grumpy. And I could get really annoyed with him and go, well, we have to do homework. So when are we going to do homework? And right, we need to sit down and get this done. Or, well, do you know how lucky you are about how much food you have? And get caught into that, or defensive, or whatever. But if I just sit there and go, wow, that sounds like you're really annoyed and you want a bit more control or choices in your life, and you're really fed up of doing what you're told to all the time. So just, it helps you not take it as personally, because it could be, well, I'm complaining at you for giving me bad food and you're a bad mom. And it's about not hearing that side. But what is it he's trying to tell me that he needs more of, or that wants more of? And so it might just be saying, wow, you want a bit more control and choices. And he's, yes, I want to pick what I want to eat. And it's okay, great. Well, we can then work on that. We can come up with a solution. Obviously, I'm not going to let him eat ice cream all the time, but I might say, okay, well, which fruit do you want? You can have a fruit, but here's 5 options. Or do you want this or this? So I might be giving healthy options, but I'm still giving him a choice. And I think that's, or he might talk about homework. And then I ask a question of, okay, yeah, it really sucks that you have to do homework, but what's your plan? How would you like to approach your homework? Then we're on the same side. It's almost, well, how can we figure this out together rather than me versus him? I think it really helps you, like I said, not take it personally. It help the person, the family member, anybody that you're talking to, see themselves, well, they feel listened to, they see themselves as there's something valid that they want here, and we could work on it together. So it might be your colleagues complaining about a meeting and you're equally frustrated, and it seems like to go around and say, okay, well, how would you like the meeting to be different? What is it we could do about this? So I think it's the listening is the first step. We could have a whole other podcast on solution focused questions of what you do then, but it's really about what's useful in that moment. What are they doing well already? Where are their strengths? What do they want more of, so that something could be different and better going forward? So I think it just has a really different lens or a different feel to it, that instead of getting bogged down by, oh my God, this is awful, and right now I'm the bad guy and I've got to do something different. How can we be a team and work on this together?
I love that. How can we be a team and work on this together? Because we do talk a lot now about collaboration, and I talk about connection and collaboration. I was just, as you were mentioning your son's example, I'm going through something at the moment and I'm just thinking, oh my God, I'm taking notes. Yeah, I've got to reply what Jane says straight away. Because I mean, I've got a 9-year-old son, and mornings have become a nightmare, to the point where he said, I'd rather you just stay in your room. And my husband does the morning shift, because for me it's just like chaos. It doesn't matter how many times I say the same thing, and what is it? It's insanity, isn't it? That try and say the same thing but you're still getting the same outcome. And I just, yeah, to reframe that, to have a conversation with him on, well, I would actually to be there in the morning, but how can we work together on making this better? So it's just finding that balance, because if he had his way, he'd eat whatever he wants for breakfast and he wouldn't brush his teeth. So there are certain things that have to be in place. But I think how you approach that conversation can change things into
Mm.
something that can be quite negative to what you're saying, which is empowering and coming together and finding a solution. This is applicable for every conversation we
Mm.
have, isn't it? Really?
Really, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So we talked about like the more challenging conversations, like someone gets into that complaining kind of matrix of just going very negative. When you hear phrases that are quite negative, I can't do this, or this isn't going to work, this isn't possible, things like that. How, as listeners, can we help shift that so that the conversation can be more around growth and finding a solution?
Yeah, I think it's a great question because, again, with my kids, it's really hard when you hear them go, "Oh, I can't do this." Well, I don't think they've said I'm a failure. When people label themselves in a negative way, "I can't do this," and I think one of the things that can really help that is assume instead of hearing them they said, "I can't do this," assume that what they've said is, "I can't do this yet." Or I haven't figured this out yet, or at the moment I'm struggling with this. It's almost putting a time frame around it that yes, they haven't figured it out, but they will do. So it's really interesting because going back to the active listening, if your child says, I can't do this, and you want to show, well, I'm being empathic here and I understand you go, yeah, you can't do this. I'm actually unintentionally reinforcing that, yes, by saying, yes, you can't do this. Whereas if I say, wow, that sounds tough, you haven't figured out how to do that yet. And then they say yes, what they're saying yes to is really different, that they haven't figured it out yet. And then we can move on to a conversation of, how might you figure it out? What would a little step forward in this area look like? So they may come up with ideas themselves, or we might look at, yeah, I remember you saying that a few months ago about you hadn't figured out this, and yet now you can do that. How did you do that? So often, I guess what we're paying attention to is where do they want to get to, but how can we use the past, the successful past, in a really useful way? How did they figure out other tough things in the past? Because then that gives them the idea, oh yeah, I did manage to, I wasn't able to play football. Now I practiced and had some lessons. Now I can play football better. And I now enjoy playing in the playground with my friends. And I say, wow, how did you do that? How did you learn how to play football? And is there anything there that might be useful here? Because often they're like, oh yeah, and I just need to give it time, or I just need to keep going, don't I? Or maybe I could just do a little bit, or let's figure out what we can do. So again, they see themselves as not somebody who can't do something, but they haven't figured it out yet. And they're entirely capable and competent of doing that. And it takes time and effort and steps forward.
Yeah.
And the same way if somebody goes, I don't know, because that can be, especially, I don't have teenagers yet, that's coming soon. Just assuming that they've said, I don't know yet. Okay, so suppose you did know, or what might you think about this? Or why don't we figure that out together? So rather than seeing it as a sort of difficult answer, just thinking, okay, well, they probably don't know yet. Right, let's figure it out. Again, I guess it's going back to that, let's figure it out together. I think when I am in the therapy role or the coaching role, it's very much flattening the hierarchy as much as you can, because a lot of therapy models are, well, I'm the expert, I have all these wonderful theories and ideas and strategies, and I'm going to help you, the client, teach you how to do this. Whereas the solution focused approach tries to balance that out. My expertise is in the questions they ask and the change process, but the client is the expert in their life of what they want. And I fully trust that they'll figure it out, but we're going to work on it together. And I guess it's also conveying that message in your personal life as well. Because I think with children, there's also a natural power differential between children and adults. So how can I empower my children over areas where they do have choice and control, or they can have that idea of, yes, I can grow here. I've got competence. I have got strengths. I can move forwards.
Yeah, I love that. That keeps coming up actually in our conversation
Mm.
today is how can we figure this out together? And what a powerful little word that is, that 3-letter word, yet. Listeners, try and use that more. It's brilliant because it opens up so many possibilities and very uplifting and empowering. Okay, so loads of tips already there, Jane, but if we could just leave our listeners with 3 of your top tips to becoming a more solution-focused listener in their everyday lives, whether that be in their professional lives or personal lives, what would those 3 top tips be?
There's something I haven't talked about that I wanted to mention. Some of them will be what I've shared, but there's one that I wanted to share, which is this idea we all have good reasons for doing something, even if it doesn't appear that way. So one of the things, because I do a lot of couples work, one of the things that I talk about is the idea of be curious, not furious. So thinking, well, what is it I've seen this person do this or say this, and it seems really negative, but what's their good reason for doing that? How can I be curious? And often people have got a really good explanation. Oh, that wasn't what I meant, or that wasn't what I said, or what I did was this. So I think that's the sort of first step in listening. It's about how do I just show up in every conversation, being willing to listen, willing to understand, be really curious about what the person is saying. So I think that's my top one. Be curious, not furious. That has saved my marriage numerous times as one of my clients. And I think the other ones are ones that I've mentioned. So I think it's really just listening to somebody, seeing them at their best. How can I listen to them at their best and see their strengths and resources? So I'm paying attention to different parts of the conversation than I normally would. And also it's thinking, what does this person really want? So there's like another phrase that really helps me hold into it when somebody's complaining. What's the wish behind the complaint? What does somebody want? And then how can we work on that together? So again, really paying attention to what does this person want? So I think those have been my top tips.
I love those. So just to recap, first one, be curious, not furious. I'm absolutely going to be writing that down on a post-it note and posting it everywhere. Number two, seeing somebody at their best. Love that approach. And then the last one, what is the wish behind the complaint? Wow, what a reframe. What is a wish behind the complaint? I love that. Now, you have talked about curiosity. I think we've definitely touched on connection in there, but the Six Comms podcast is founded upon these 6 C's of effective communication. So, last question that I ask all my guests, Jane, is of all of those 6 C's, which one resonates with you most and why? Just to recap on what they all are: connection, curiosity, and compassion, clarity, customization, and consistency. And perhaps connect that with the topic that we've been talking about today, which is around listening.
So hard because I love your 6 C's. I think there's such a great framework for all the things that are really important in communication. But I think for me, it's about the connection. Why am I having this conversation in the first place? Why am I interested? I want to be a good mom. I want a good relationship with my kids. I want a good relationship with my husband. I want a good relationship with my colleague. Obviously, I want to be good at the job I do. But I think that is like the purpose of the why. I wouldn't be putting all this time and energy into listening if I didn't care about the person I was talking to. So I think that for me is the overarching. It's about having a good relationship and obviously curious. We've talked about curiosity, be curious, not furious. That really comes into it. Listening with empathy and compassion also there. But I think it's to support the connection. I think all of the other things for me, that's the sort of key.
Yeah. So the key is connection. But I always say like connection and curiosity are best friends, really. They work
Mhm.
together. I've loved this, Jane. It's really resonated so much. And I think it will resonate a lot with our listeners and be so helpful in how we approach conversations, both in our professional and personal lives. So thank you so much for joining me.
You are very welcome. It's been lovely to talk to you. And I will share a lot of resources with, there's a lot of therapy books, but there's a lot of books for how to be a solution focused parent. Obviously, I've talked about that a lot today. So I will share that resources. So people who are interested in this way of communicating know where to go for some more ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. It will be all in the show notes. So yeah, I'd really recommend having a look there. Okay. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too.